And you're live.
Okay. Very good. All right. I'm not seeing everybody. I assume we have a quorum. Is everybody on? Let's see who we got. We got Jay, we got Jeff, we got John, we got Nathan. Okay, guess we're good. All right. I will call the meeting to order. First up is our Pledge of Allegiance. If John would lead us again on that.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. So first up is the approval of the minutes of February 22nd, 2021 and March 1st of 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion from Jay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Earl. Any corrections, deletions, or discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of February 22nd and March 1st of 2021, I would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
yes. Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is approval of the roll of accounts for dated February 25th, 2021 in the amount of $455,294.66 and dated March 11th, 2021 in the amount of $213,143.31.
Move to
Motion to approve the rolls.
approve the roll as listed. John?
Do we have a second?
Second.
And who is that?
Earl.
Earl, okay. Thank you, Earl. Okay, if there's no discussion. Vote on the approval of the rolls. That would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next up is report of committees. Do we have any committee reports?
None.
None? Okay. So next on the agenda was public comments. There's no issues with that. We'd like to move that to the end of the agenda as we've been doing since we've been virtual. Are there any objections to that, or are we all good? Everybody looks good? Okay, not hearing any objections, we'll move that to the end of the agenda. So if there is any public tuned in, we will take any comments at the end. The phone number is posted online, and you'll have an opportunity then to weigh in. All right, next up, administrators' reports. We'll mix it up. How about if we go with Jason first?
Good evening, everyone. Just a couple things to report this evening. I will start with some of our in-service work. Our departments are working on data collection. We are the ELA department will be administering DRAs in the next few weeks. That will be the second round. There'll be some important information to gather. We just completed our second trimester, so we also have grades, and we will hopefully have some more information regarding NWEAs coming soon. We also talked about summer enrichment, the potential for summer enrichment activities and remediation opportunities. And we also consider continuing to have those conversations at the administrative team level. Teachers did have some time to plan as well. And we do have some upcoming dates. On the 14th and 15th of April will be our Student Spotlight and Renaissance Assembly. So we're still recognizing students for character and academics in regards to that. And that's all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Gower.
Hello. I just have one quick thing. So last week we had parent-teacher conferences. They were virtual as they were earlier in the year. We had a pretty good turnout, and sometimes our conferences are met by ways of IEP meetings or other meetings that they have before those nights. But we're finding that the virtual conferences are actually, working pretty well. Sometimes they're phone calls and sometimes they're Google meetings, but they're actually working out better than I think we anticipated. So that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you very much. And let's see, does Kyle have anything to add for the elementary school?
Jason's already alluded to it. I will be intently tuned in to the NWEA state assessment and staying on top of that, because that'll be a responsibility that I will hold to schedule that testing. I've had some experience with that particular platform in the past, so I'm not feeling too nervous about it. And our attendance committee meets regularly, and that's something that I also head up. So we're, in addition to the other great things that are going on, we're also tracking to make sure that students are participating in the way that they need to be.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Bell.
Good evening, everyone. A couple of quick hitters. Our student of the month this month was senior Cassidy McIntyre. Fantastic student for the past 4 years and a very well-deserving student to receive the Student of the Month honors by the faculty. Winter Carnival, winter/spring carnival, I should say, has kicked off this week. The first event got canceled today, and that was the snowshoe relay race. For obvious reasons, got canceled, but they're out playing disc golf. They had mini golf in the gym. They did Simon Says, all COVID accurate or COVID safe activities. So it's good to see that going on in the school finally this year. I also, like Jason, wanted to review a little bit what we did on Friday really quick. A good portion of the day was teachers and departments reviewing lessons that they've been working on or doing in their classroom with students related to one of our NEAS goals of students as active learners. The staff have done a really good job of working together to try to do different types of lessons that involve students using information and not just regurgitating information in worksheets or on tests, different things like that. So they spent a good part of the day discussing some lessons that they had going on in their classrooms and then giving feedback and discussing those as a department. Then we also spent part of the day reviewing our draft vision of the graduate. Again, that was another NEAS goal. And last but certainly not least, another NEAS goal that we worked on Friday was discussing the data collection of common assessments, as well as starting to plan out a process for consistently and constantly reviewing that data that's collected by the department. So Friday, there was a lot going on, and the staff did an absolutely fantastic job working together on those three things. And that's it for me.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Did Mr. Hensby have anything to add to the high school report?
Yeah, I just like to thank Jason and Chad. I watched those two individuals work. We are so lucky for what we have for leadership at the school. We are. They are, compassionate, kind, and give praise when needed. And they run a great ship. They really do. And I've watched how hard they've worked this year, and I really appreciate both of them. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rick. I'll pay you $20 tomorrow.
Well, you
Thank you,
are
Rick.
a valuable member of that team as well, Rick. Okay, let's see. Who we got next? Why don't we go to Jennifer?
Okay. We recently had a CPR training for about 17 of our ed techs, and this was needed for them to continue their behavioral health professional certification. And we are beginning to look at planning our ESY program, which occurs in the summer. It will traditionally is 3 weeks, 4 days a week. And that's if it's ordered on a student's IEP.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Burgoyne.
I'm on the agenda, so I'll wait to speak on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, who else we got? Does Michelle Lake have something to add to the conversation this evening?
Good evening. I would like to just share that, as we are gearing up for NWEA testing, that it's going to take a little bit of time to get everyone up for new training. We're onboarding our school system, and we've got a couple of different levels of training to go through, some for administrative, some for actual teachers and proctors. But I'm working on getting that all organized and communicating with folks, and we're on our way. It's going to be, I think, a little bit of a learning curve for all of us, but we're well on our way, and we're looking forward to seeing how our kids perform and how the tests perform, and how, taking it this year will ready us for next year when we can really look at the data more critically. So that's what we've been doing. That's what I've been working on curriculum-wise.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have Mary on here. Is that correct? I'm not seeing Mary. Okay. Mr. Thurston, do you have anything to add from the WEA?
Nothing to add tonight, but thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Is that everybody? Did I think I got everybody? All right. So next up is, did somebody say something there? Okay, guess not. Okay, so finance and systems report. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. So this month's budget abstract tells us that 71.51% of the fiscal year has passed. 70.79% of the budget has been accounted for. If encumbered items are removed, 69.7% of the budget has actually been spent. And I just thought that I would mention on the roll of accounts that you approved this evening, we paid our bus lease payments for this year. So now all of our bond payments and bus lease payments have been paid.
Okay, well, obviously that covers quite an encumbrance.
Yep.
All right, very good. And I guess that takes us to Peter.
Yeah, and I guess I would just start off by saying that abstract you just saw is running very tight. As you can see, those percentages are very close and right where you'd want to see them if you're running a very tight budget, and that's what's happening right now, and that will play into the conversation a little bit later on this evening here. So I don't know if Shelley has been able to join us. I know she was between two meetings tonight, so I don't know if she's here. But if she's not, I just wanted to say a few words on a situation that occurred at the Winslow Elementary School on Thursday, sometime late Thursday night, probably early Thursday morning. when Erica Gower, the principal, walked into the building very early at about 6 o'clock or whenever she got there, realized that there was water flowing all over the floor on the first floor and water coming out of the ceiling tiles, and it was quite a mess. She quickly called me and had a quick conversation. Was not going to be possible to have students in school due to the lateness of how all of this occurred. And so we made the decision to call off school for that day. From what we understand, a fitting on one of the water stations on the second floor let go, and water started to leak. And we're not sure what time that started, but it had been leaking for a while before people got there. Fortunately, Shelley Phillips came in. The fire department was called. They came in. They helped us remove a lot of the water. They helped us with the carpets. Shelley and the custodial crew worked diligently to get everything moved and cleaned that needed to be cleaned with fans and dehumidifiers. We had some ed techs in the building that had come to work. They helped us tremendously. And Erica, you might want to mention who those 2 ed techs were.
Sure, absolutely. We have 2 that ride the bus in the morning, so they get there bright and early. And it was Cindy Pilot and Michelle Carey. They both stayed and helped, and as Peter said, they were tremendous help. So.
And then we had administrators, secretaries, technology, food service, everybody. It was all hands on deck that was there to move things. So because of the expediency of how everything happened and the way everybody jumped on board, everything got cleaned up relatively quickly. Everything had the opportunity to dry over the weekend, and this morning we were ready to go back to school. Will is between 2 meetings this evening, but I know he and his team are looking at some of the potential damage to some of the Chromebooks that were in one of the areas. So as soon as we get that information, we'll be able to decide what it is that we need to do with that. I also wanted to mention that this is the time of year when job opportunities start to open and we start looking at transferring people. And we have 2 names tonight that we just want to bring to your attention from the Winslow Elementary School. And the first is Christine Harrington. She's a first grade teacher. She's asked to transfer to the 4-year-old program, and that transfer has been approved. And the next is Andrea Bragdon. She is currently a 3rd grade teacher, and she has asked to be transferred to the literacy specialist position that is currently being held by Linda Haig, and that too was approved. So we're very pleased that we have those 2 positions filled. And so now we need to advertise and look to backfill, and we will have more transfers coming, I'm sure, because it's that time of year when the dominoes start to take place. The other thing that I wanted to mention briefly, and you'll hear more about this, currently we have a recycling program at the Winslow Elementary School with food waste. We've had this for several years now, and Kyle Price can certainly speak to this much better than I can. It's been a very successful program. It has saved the town, obviously, some money with that because of the recycling and the cost of all of that. In working with Erica LaCroix, the new town manager, and Ray Karen, town council, they are very interested in doing more with recycling and have asked if we would be interested as a school district to include our school as part of this program. So we've met with Shelley and we've met with Chad briefly to discuss the possibilities and what this could entail. We are very much in support of the environment and doing whatever we can for the environment, in addition to saving the town some tax dollar money because of the recycling program. So we are looking into what does that mean for us as we move forward, and more information will be coming. Just a reminder that we're scheduled to meet with the town council tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock to go over the budget. That will be virtual as well. And I have sent you a link to that meeting for tomorrow night. And that's all I have, Joel.
Okay. Any questions from anybody for Peter? Earl has his hand up, I think.
You said that somebody was moving into the position, the the specialist one, the second one, long day. Where's the person who currently occupying that position going?
She is retiring this year.
Okay.
Any other questions for Peter? Okay. All right. Hearing none, we'll go on to old business. So first up on that is the proposed 2021-22 budget cuts and adjustments. So I presume that'll be Peter.
Yes, and I'll, before we get to that list, I guess I would ask, you've probably had a chance to review more of the budget. If there are any other questions on any of the budget lines that you've seen. I know we've done presentations of all of the cost centers, but if there are any other questions that we can answer for you, we gladly do that. If there are no questions, what we would like to do is show you the work that we've done in an attempt to reduce this budget further and still provide the services that we need for our students.
John has his hand raised.
Just the simple, did the town council get back to you, Peter, to give you guidance as to what they thought of our initial presentation?
At our first presentation, John, I believe it was Ray Karen who asked Erica if she had any thoughts about the presentation that had been given, and I believe at that time Erica said Erica felt that we were within the margin that they were expecting with our budgets. We understand that this is a very difficult year for a lot of different reasons with COVID and revenues. And so we have worked hard to work with the town in order to do whatever we can to further reduce our budget and still maintain the services that we feel are necessary for our students. And I think you'll see this evening when we show you these cuts that we've made. And when I say cuts, we've been able to use another funding source for some of these items. And that other funding source is main care. As you know, main care is billable dollars for services for students. Since we didn't have a lot of things that were taking place last year due to COVID, we were able to build that main care funds up a little bit in terms of not expending things. So as you'll see in just a moment, you'll see where we've used some of that money to buy out some of the things in this budget in order to further reduce our cost. So on the list that you see, I'm going to start off way over on the left-hand column. And I'm not sure if you can see that on yours, but on the one that I'm looking at, we at the last meeting said to you that the total request this year was $17,481,143.35. We've been able to work with that number and reduce that with the following cuts or adjustments that we've made. So the first thing, and when I say we, the administrative team met to discuss all of these, and everyone is in agreement. The first item you see is $75,000 in insurance savings. You hear about this every single year. Currently in our budget, we have 10% budgeted, which is the maximum for insurance, not knowing what our rate is going to come in at. We should know what our highest rate is going to be in the last week of March, then we will know our actual rate in the first or second week in April. But I know that we have to have a number to plug in this in anticipation so that people can plan. So what we did is we planned for 7%. We originally had 10% budgeted. Every percent for us is roughly $25,000 at the moment, and that changes as well depending on who the individuals are. So safely, we've put in 7%. We think it's safe. So if we come in at 7%, that means we can reduce this budget by $75,000. If the insurance comes in lower than 7, obviously we can take more out. So that would be the hope, that it would come in lower. But at this point in time, we've budgeted for 7%. The next item that you see, and stop me anytime, the next item that you see are the Mpa computers, 7th and 8th grade, for staff and for students and staff. We have learned that the Mpa program is going to still be in effect, and so we'll be able to take that $90,000 out of the budget, as we had mentioned to you last time. So it's that will be a help to us. The next piece is accreditation, and that was $10,000. That's for the high school to have their accreditation and to do that work and to be accredited. That's one of the items where we will use main care funds to purchase or pay for that accreditation. So even though it's a cut to this budget, we will still be able to follow through with our accreditation to make sure that the high school is accredited through the use of main care money. The next one is the final year of a computer lease payment. You'll see that that was a little over $16,000, and this is the last year of that. And we are going to buy that payment out using main care money as well, so that we take it out of next year's budget. The next 3 items are irrigation wheels, and this is a piece of equipment that has been needed for years. It keeps our fields watered and in good shape, which prevents athletes from being injured. It's budgeted in all 3 buildings. And so this is another item that we hope to use main care money to buy out of this budget. It's important simply because of maintenance and safety as well. The next item that you see there is $3,000 summer school for Winslow High School. Chad had that budgeted. We will use some of our CARES money for any high school summer programming that Chad would like to pursue, or any of the building administrators for that matter. You heard Jason mention it earlier that his staff is talking about that as well. So CARES money will be used for that. We have a sewer line issue that comes off from the superintendent's office that I believe has been problematic for the past few years, and that will be repaired before it has major issues, and we can use construction bond money for that particular project. The intercom system is the next thing at the Winslow Elementary School that was budgeted. The intercom system is in really poor shape, and it's something that needs to be addressed and taken care of. We will use main care money to repair that intercom system as well. The clock system is something that we've had conversations with Erica. She feels as though that is one of the things that we can cut out of that list. It's not as much of a priority as the intercom system, so that will be a cut. The next is teacher reimbursement. We had budgeted, those are contractual components where we had budgeted money, and then we've had some people indicate to us that they may not be taking courses next year in certain buildings. So we felt we could take $4,000 out of that line. We had admission tuition, that's reimbursement. Administrators take courses, have to take courses as well for recertification. And in speaking to the administrators, that is the amount of money we felt we could take out of there, based on the number of courses people felt that they were not going to take. And the last thing that you see on that list is a Winslow Elementary School PE teacher to unfilled. We have our PE teacher is retiring this year. That teacher is obviously at the upper end of the scale. When we have somebody that we know is going to leave, we try to budget for that position. We do an estimate and we plug in a number, somebody with 5 years experience with masters as a starting point. It works fairly well for us. Sometimes we get hurt by that. We find somebody who has a lot of years of experience and would be great for our district. So we have to find the money someplace else when that happens. But for the most part, that's how we do that. That's how we plan for it, and it's worked fairly well overall. So the end result of that, if you look at, and I'm going to go back just for a second and go back to the new art teacher up to the top of the list, you'll see there was a request to increase art services at the high school, and I believe it could impact the junior high as well. Jason, you can just give me a nod if that's correct. We currently have a teacher who is employed who is not full-time. By giving her full-time status, she can do digital art course at the high school and expand that program for our students. It's something that we feel would be outstanding for our students to be exposed to. So what you see there is the cost to expand her to full-time and the supplies to get the program up and running. And then the next line you see underneath that, it says new speech therapists. We have students who need speech services, and our caseloads for our speech instructors are full. So by law, there can only be so many students on a teacher's caseload. So what we plan to do with that is contract those services out so that we can provide those services to our students. So when you look at that list, you'll see that we've added some to the some instructional time to the art program and a new program to the art program. We've added the speech therapist because that is something that is needed by law. And then you see all the other things that have either been cut or have been bought out using another funding source. So at the bottom, you'll see $235,264.56. That's what we've been able to reduce this budget by. I will tell you, those of you who have been with us all along and know what's in the various lines, this is a budget of need. It's not a budget with any wish list in it. And so by reducing this to this amount, knowing that we need to do whatever we can to help this year with the budgets, that's a pretty significant reduction in this particular budget. So how does that play out with our revenue sheet? Is the last time that we showed you a revenue sheet, if you look over to the next to last column, the last time that we presented this to you, that number was $17,481,143.35, or that represented a 3.5% increase of new money, total money over last year's budget, or roughly $600,597.99. After these cuts and these adjustments, that number has now been reduced to what you see on your screen, which is $17,245,878.79, or a 2.16% increase over last year. And I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure why. Or as you can see, $365,303.43 in new money. So if you want to bear with me, I'll walk you through this as we have done before. The state subsidy, as you can see, I'm still in that next to last column. The state subsidy has not changed. That's still $7,928,902.57. The amount of money revenue that we receive for being part of the educational service center has not changed. That's still $60,669, giving us a total of $7,989,872.18. As you work your way down through the various revenues, you'll see that everything is the same. Nothing has changed until you get to the undesignated fund. At the first time that we showed you this sheet, we had $100,000 in the undesignated fund. Since then, we've looked at our undesignated fund to see if it was possible for us to perhaps put more from the undesignated fund to help this budget. As you know, because of COVID, we didn't run a lot of the programs last year. And we were able to buy things out of last year's budget to help this year's budget. But because we didn't run some of the programs, that built our undesignated fund a little bit. Now, in most years, our undesignated fund gets very little that flows into it because, as you saw tonight on our revenue, on our budget abstract, you saw how close we were running things. 71% of the years gone by, we're at 70 point something percent. We typically run very, very close, but because of COVID, we had a little more that flowed into our undesignated because we didn't spend, and we didn't spend on things that we could have, but we didn't because we knew we needed to try to build that undesignated fund to try to help this year's budget. So we put in an extra $60,000. So we were using 160 from the undesignated fund to help this year's budget. We think, we're quite confident, that we'll be able to sustain that for at least 3 or 4 years with that amount, assuming a little more flows into the undesignated fund each year. So with that said, if you look down to the bottom, the next to last line where it says total state and school revenues, the total of our revenues at this point, and I'm having a really hard time to see with these glasses, so give me a second. It's kind of funny. If I put these glasses on, I can see the sheet of paper, but I can't see the screen. So if you look at our total of revenues now, it's $8,695,532. If you subtract that from the total request of $17,245,878, we are now looking for a tax appropriation of $8,550,378.47, which is a 2.26% increase in local taxation, or we would be asking for $188,855.88. Now, having said that, first week, second week of April, we will have our insurance, our actual insurance numbers. If those numbers come in less than 7%, for every percent that we get that's less than 7, we could reduce that number even more. So at this point in time, this would look like it would be the worst case scenario. It could even be a little bit better than this if you approve of, if you agree with what we've done. And we're not asking you to vote on the budget tonight. We're just giving you this information. This is what we've been able to reduce it to, and this is where we stand right now. So with that, I'll entertain questions.
Jay has his hand up. Go right ahead, Jay. You're muted, Jay.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Peter and the team, for all the work that goes into the budget. It's hard every year. It must have been particularly hard this year because there are so many intense student needs and staff needs that you've had to pay attention to, not to mention water breaks. I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. The first question I have goes back on the page that you shared with us, Peter, on cuts and additions. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the choice to repair the intercom system rather than replacing it. I just want to feel comfortable because the intercom system is an essential part of the school's security equipment. And I haven't seen the school's emergency plans yet, but I'm sure that being able to communicate across the school is critical to that. So I just want to make sure that if we need to be replacing it, that we're not putting something in place that may not get us through a time that we really need it.
Thanks, Jay. I can't see if Shelley is online with us right now, but I believe the amount of money that's there is to replace the intercom system, not to repair. That is to replace.
That's my understanding as well, Peter.
Okay, I must have misunderstood. I thought you said you were repairing it. So that's good. If it needs to be replaced, it needs to be replaced. The second question is on the page you were sharing with us, and I wonder if anybody on the call knows what does $188,000. How much of a mill is that in Winslow? I just don't know that information.
I believe a mill in Winslow, I believe, is over 600,000. What the exact number is, I'm not sure. I think I see Erica online tonight. So, and I see Jeff West online tonight. So maybe he could tell us that.
I have it's 630 something. If you can give me just a second, I can put it in the chat for everybody.
So it's more or less a quarter of a mil. Would be 188,000. Okay, that's very helpful. Those are the only questions I have right now. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Peter? I don't see any other hands up right now. Unless I'm missing something.
I guess I would ask the board. I'm not asking you to take a vote on this tonight, but you know what we have in this budget, and you know what we've just removed or tried to buy out using other funding sources. The board comfortable with these pieces?
I can tell you that, and compared to other years and some really tight budgeting years we've had, the administration and Peter, you guys did a great job because this is already to the point where we usually end up. So I think you've done a wonderful job, and it seems very reasonable.
Thanks, John. Erica just put in the chat box, I don't know if you saw it, but a mill in Winslow is $664,000. Thank you, Erica.
Okay.
So again, tomorrow evening, we will go to the town council and explain to the council what we've been able to do since the last time we've met, and answer questions that the council might have regarding other budget lines, if they have any.
Yeah, I'd comment that I think the administration has done a very good job putting this together, given all of what's going on. Figuring your budgets over year when last year was not a normal year, and neither is this year. So that definitely makes it difficult. So I'd say you have all done well with this. And for those of us who've been around long enough to know, been through a number of budget cycles, this is at least maybe behind the scenes with the administration, it's been a bit crazy, but definitely how it's come together to the standpoint of coming to the board with the information and with less question marks and other such things that we've dealt with other years that have made the process outwardly more difficult anyway, at least outwardly. Maybe inwardly you guys have struggled with it, but I'd have to commend everybody's work on this. So I see John nodding. He's been through many of these, and sometimes they can be quite problematic getting to the point we are now. So
Actually, I am very impressed because we've set ourselves up for next year in a better position than I expected. I thought rolling into the next budget season, we would have to tackle some really tough issues, and we still will. I'm not saying we won't, but I'm saying it may be better than even I thought. So that's a good sign for the future.
Well, keep in mind that next year we have teacher negotiations again, and we have other contracts to negotiate. So it's a revolving door. So you know we're trying to position ourselves as best as we can, but we do know that when we can help one year, we need to, and this is the year that we can help.
yeah, and given the work that's been done, the advantages getting to a two-school system for the most part, given our particular sixth grade issue. I mean, obviously the cost avoidance there has been helpful in achieving this level of increase to a much lower level than we've struggled with in the past to get anywhere near the number we're at now. So I think that's been helpful. So, all right. Any other questions for Peter on this particular subject? Obviously, we have our workshop tomorrow night with the council, so we can discuss this further with them and get their thoughts on where we're at. But having heard some of their workshops and such, I think their work is coming along pretty well. So so we'll see how this goes tomorrow night.
I'd just like to comment before we leave this agenda item. I appreciate seeing Jeff West online with us this evening. I appreciate seeing Erica online with us this evening. At other nights, we've had Ray Karen with us. We've had other members of the council with us who expressed an interest in seeing our budgets and what we have in our budgets, what has been put together. It's important for us, for our town council to see, what the needs are and why we're asking for the things that we're asking for. So I appreciate seeing you guys here. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with those sentiments as well. And I'd also have to say I saw Erica's interview on TV with the hydro dams, and I think that was well done and very well explained, Erica. So thank you for representing our town well on that front.
Oh, thank you, Joel. I just don't want to talk about the dam anymore.
You should have been here how many years ago?
I know, and we're going to do it again. But just before you all get off the budget topic, I know how hard it is to be putting one of these together, and I probably know better than a lot of you there do who are not administrative. And to see this budget come down just from the first presentation, what it has, just shows how much work you all have put into it. And I really appreciate that you all have taken that role, because I know a lot of times councils and school boards get put at odds with each other. And this is a really tough year. So, I mean, kudos to all of you for the work you've put in. And I hope we all can continue to work together and we get through this just fine. We will, but it's not going to come without some amount of pain on everybody's part. So thank you all.
Thank you, Erica. John, go ahead.
I just wanted to add this. I think some of the decisions that were made by the people deciding what to do with the COVID money was a main attribute into getting this done. Because think about just the buses alone, was thousands of dollars, and some really good decisions on how to spend the money.
Agreed. Okay. So we'll discuss this more tomorrow night with the council. So we'll move on to the second draft of the proposed 2021-2022 revenue sheet. Did you really cover that as part of the other part, Peter?
I did, Joel.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to be sure we're talking the same thing. Okay, next up is reopening of schools update. Obviously a hot topic.
It is, and you know, the hot topic starts with the words reopening, because it's very misleading. When you think of reopening, you think that something's been closed. So when you hear reopening, you think you're going to have to open it up. So let me start with that. As you mentioned, Joel, it's a hot topic. There's been a lot of press coverage regarding the reopening of schools. And it's unfortunate that some of the information that's being published can be misleading to somebody who's just picking up the paper or listening to the news and not knowing that they may be talking about another part of the country, not Maine. And I think that's part of what we need to clarify this evening. You may have heard on the national news that with a reduction of the CDC guidelines, schools are able to reopen. And when you hear that here in Maine, you think differently than somebody in another state where they've been closed to in-person learning all year long. In fact, 45% of the states, 45% of the schools in the country have been closed to in-person learning and just been going remotely. Why? Because in the majority of those states, the CDC, they've followed the national CDC requirements for social distancing. And the national requirements have been 6 feet, student to student, and student to adult. 6 feet. So they've just made the decision to reduce that from 6 feet to 3 feet, student to student, but still 6 feet, adult to student. So, in Maine, the CDC doesn't follow the national requirements. It follows the American Academy of Pediatric guidelines. We have already been at 3 feet, student to student, all year. We have been at 6 feet, student to adult, all year. The change that you are hearing about that's all over the news doesn't affect us because we've already been doing it. To say it another way, what's happened nationally, they're moving more towards the model that we have. They've adopted our model, realizing they didn't have to be at 6 feet. Because at 6 feet, it was nearly impossible. Well, as you can see, 45% of the schools haven't been back to in-person learning. Impossible to have in-person instruction. So for us, the change that you're reading about doesn't change anything for us. Now, here's a question we get all the time. We are asked, how come some Maine schools have students back in school in person for in-person learning every day of the week? How come they can do it and you can't? How come? It's a frustrating question. But here's one of the answers. Some of the schools in Maine have enough students who have elected to go remote learning for the entire year that they've reduced their student population of those kids who would be in school. And so for the kids that remain, for the students that remain, they can socially distance and have them back. Let me put it another way. Let's say I've got a classroom of 20 students. If all 20 students want to come back to school, we can't fit all 20 students in that classroom. Trust me, we've measured, we've done all those things. We had another conversation today with the elementary school to say, what does this look like? So when you start looking at how many desks can you put in that room, you're always 6 or 7 desks short. And you have to take into consideration that the adult is supposed to be 6 feet away from the student, which limits even more capacity. But out of that classroom of 20, let's say you had 10 students who decided we're going to go remote for the rest of the year. Now you only have 10 students that you need to fit in that classroom, and that you can do. In Winslow, we do not have great numbers of families who are choosing to go fully remote. So it's impossible for us to bring more kids back with the guidelines that are still in place, that have been in place all year, that we need to adhere to. I'll stop right there and open it up if you have any questions before I go on.
So Peter, if I could ask, as far as the number of remote students, I think we started the year somewhere around 15 or 20% of our population was remote. Is that still in the ballpark? I know it changes from day to day or week to week, but is it still roughly that number?
I will let the building administrators weigh in on that, but before they do, we've had situations where we've asked our parents we've given them windows of opportunity to say, you're remote, you have by such and such a date, please let us know if you want to bring your child back. Erica has probably just received the last group of students who want to come back remote, and that was, I think, about 19 students, Erica, just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So if anything, we have more and more kids who have been remote who want to be back in school, which further limits our opportunities to do what some buildings are doing, which is be able to be open every day because they don't have as many students. So, Chad, I'm not sure if you could answer Joel's question from a high school perspective.
Yeah, so it kind of fluctuates with us because we've allowed for that kind of free-flowing back and forth because we want students to come back if they want to come back. So we haven't put deadlines on it, even though we started the year doing that. We were up to about 25% roughly, but it's hard to gauge without looking at each individual number, because if a student needs to quarantine, maybe they went on a trip out of state, maybe they were exposed to COVID, we put them in the remote learner group. So that number is constantly kind of doing this number. But 25% is a good average number that we're at.
Right, but obviously if that number is moving with those couple of weeks worth of quarantine or whatever, and of course in different classrooms, I mean, some people might be going out of one classroom and into another. It doesn't give you the kind of demographic that allows you to have a certain amount of space you can count on that you can bring back X number of students.
I'm glad you said that. So perfect example. Let's say John wants to come back full time, okay? And he has Earl as a teacher, Jay as a teacher, and Nate as a teacher. Well, in Earl's class on that opposite cohort, he may only have 5 kids in that class. Whereas in John's cohort day, there may be 12 in that class. So, okay, it works on that. But maybe Jay's class, it's the opposite, where Jay on John's in-person day has 5, but on John's opposite day, he's at 13. Well, with the distancing, we can't get more than 13 desks in Jay's classroom. So it works for Earl's class, doesn't work for Jay's. And Nate's could go either way. It could be half and half. And so it may work for him for some classes, may not work for some classes. If students were to come back full time, we would have to look at every individual kid and what classes they go. And we kind of do that right now when a student's coming back from being remote. Sometimes there's a legit reason why we have to put them in another cohort. And part of that reason may be that Earl's class can't fit him. So we'll work with the family and say, hey, is it okay if we put him in cohort 2 instead of cohort 1? Because the teacher's classes will fit better that way. We're always looking at those things. It's not just clear cut. Yeah, sure, there's some classes, there may only be 3 kids in that class. And that's probably what people might hear from their children at home. They may say, well, geez, I heard that there's only 3 kids in my son's class. Yeah, because there may be 13 on the opposite day or 14 on the opposite day. It's not an even split 50-50.
The other component, if I could jump in for just a second, would be oftentimes there's more than just the teacher. We think of just the teacher, but I know in like the 6th grade building, you would say, wow, there's all kinds of space. We have 3 resource rooms for special education. And then in our mainstream classroom, you could have a math class with 6 students with an ed tech, which adds the 6-foot element as well. So another piece to consider. I know when we look at students returning, in addition to the breakfast, you're serving the breakfast time, the lunch time, and keeping your spacing while kids eat. So that adult component does factor in more than just the teacher.
And one thing I've heard in other schools is that they have extra classrooms. So they may like if it's that the room won't fit that many kids, they may have 4 or 5 kids sitting in another room with maybe an ed tech or an avatar they're just remoting into that teacher's classroom. I do want to point out that with the addition of the junior high to the high school, not only did we build an addition, we took every available classroom and made it a junior high class or expanded high school class. So that extra space is not available at the high school to do that with as well. And not to mention that would also involve adding staff and trying to find staff members to hold those classes and yada, yada, yada.
Well, and when we talk about adding staff, we've hired some people with COVID money to be what we call our super subs. So in each building, we have these additional staff members. But to be quite honest with all of you, it's very difficult finding teachers, additional teachers of quality to come in and work with our students because they're just not there. Every school district in the state of Maine is looking for the same thing. So it's very difficult. Either you have space issues or you have capacity issues because you don't have the personnel to make it happen. So just to go back and kind of recap that whole piece. Yes, the guidelines have changed from a national perspective, but that doesn't impact us because we were always where the guidelines have changed too. That's how we've been operating. That's how we've set up the school year to be able to provide as much in-person learning as possible in an environment where if somebody tests positive, we don't have to shut down the entire school. We've only had to do contact tracing, and we've had to have students quarantine for different situations, but we haven't had to shut down an entire school on a regular basis in order for that to happen. So that's another piece to keep in mind. Having said all of that, we know that information is changing on a daily basis. We know that every day people are being vaccinated. The big question mark is, what does that mean? Well, we know that once staff have been vaccinated with both vaccinations and 14 days after the second vaccination, we know that if there's a case that staff member now no longer needs to quarantine. That's going to be huge for us because every time we have a case and we ask a staff member to quarantine, that goes back to that pool of who's going to teach those students. That's huge. So once that happens, that's going to help us in that sense. We don't know if there's going to be an announcement at some point once we have herd immunity that we can bring all kids back. We're all waiting if that's going to happen. So one of the things that we need to do is have conversations with our staff and with our administrative team and say, if we get the green light at some point, if we get the green light and they say it is safe to bring all kids back, we need to be able to quickly transition and make that happen. That's going to be a task in itself, but those are the conversations that we need to have in the event that happens. If the social distancing requirements don't change and they stay at 3 feet, it's not much different than we can do right now than what we're doing in terms of having more kids at school. It truly limits us and other school districts in the state. I think the other thing that I want to just caution everyone with is, although we're heading in the right direction, on March 5th, I sent out one of those messages that I hate to send out, and I hope that at some point I stop sending them out, where I've said that an individual associated with Winslow Elementary School tested positive, March 5th. It impacted 38 students and 2 staff members. All of those people had to quarantine. Last Friday, March 19th, we had an individual associated with Winslow High School tested positive. It impacted 12 students, 4 staff members. Again, puts an incredible strain on the staff because they're quarantined. After we get off this meeting tonight, I received a text message from Chad Bell. Maybe I know he didn't know I was going to say this, but he said I need to talk because I just learned that we have another COVID case at the high school. So we'll be working on another case after this meeting tonight. You may have read in the paper, China Middle School, the entire school closed due to COVID. Auburn schools closed due to COVID. So we're not out of the woods. And I think, it's really important for us to remind everyone that we are not out of the woods. And at the same time, thank people for the work that they've done, because the parents have been extremely supportive, been extremely patient. I know they're frustrated. We are as frustrated as the parents are that we can't bring more kids back to school. And I say that with all honesty. And I know that the board is frustrated as well. We're all hoping to hear, can we bring our kids back? Can we bring more back? But until these guidelines change, we have to live by and abide by these guidelines. But with that, I would, again, any questions or thoughts that people might have. We are meeting Tuesday, like I said, tomorrow, to have those conversations, and those conversations are, what if we get the green light? What do we need to do?
So, Peter, can I just add a comment to what you just said about the staff and the support and, kind of what happens when we have a case? So at the high school, we've had 7 cases this year, 165 total that have been put into quarantine, 27 staff and 138 students. So back in early December, before we went fully remote, we had a situation where we had a total of 9 staff out of the building between being quarantined and other situations that happened at the end of a week. 9 people out. When I called Peter, I said, Peter, I don't know. We may have to close school, but my first goal is going to be to keep school open. We were able to keep school open for 2 days because staff stepped up and said, hey, I have a planning period this period. I can cover a class block 1 and I can cover a class block 2. And by the end of the day, when I sent it out, and I just said, I completely understand if you can't cover a class, but if you're able to help out, please let me know. By the end of the day, now mind you, I had 9 people out. I had 30 emails and phone calls and stop-bys of people willing to give up a planning period to help. That's dedication to make sure we kept school open. every educator in our building realizes that having kids in the building is better than having them at home. And they want to do everything in their power to get kids into school and keep kids into school. With the case on Friday, I had 4 out. It's very, very hard. And that's just 4 with that case. I also have, a teacher who's teaching remotely. I also have a staff member whose wife actually had a baby on Friday. So staff out for other reasons as well, and trying to find coverage. Again, it was like, Peter, I don't know if we can do it. We had together a plan. It was very limp together. And then over the weekend, I had a sub call in sick. So it was like, oh God, what are we going to do? I called Jason yesterday. I think it was like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we made a plan. Jason came down to the office at 6:30 in the morning, and we were trying to say, okay, who do you have for subs that are available? Who can we piece together? Coverage from, librarians taking over classrooms to, other people around the building just working as avatars. And it's also important to note as well that, there's 4 teachers out that were quarantined on Friday. All 4 of them were teaching from their home today. There was no delay. They were teaching from their homes today. And we just had to find people to sit in their classrooms to just monitor kids as they were learning. It's not a perfect system by any means. I think the only perfect system is getting kids in school, but everybody's doing everything in their power to keep kids being educated. And I think that's very important to point out.
I want to piggyback a little bit on what Chad said, because we've had some cases where our staff have been impacted. Not only are they doing, like Chad said, they're teaching from home, but if you saw the work that their teams were doing, and by teams, I mean their grade level teams were doing to get packets ready for the kids so that the parents could pick up the work that the kids would need so that they could do remote while their teacher was at home. So we have staff that aren't allowed in the building because they're close contacts, and we have their teammates staying late, sorting through stuff, getting packets ready so all of the kids can have the work that they need when they're not able to be there. So, Chad's right. There are a variety of things that are going on, but all of it is in support of doing what we can for our students during this rather crazy and absurd time. And everybody is, working as hard as they can. And the teamwork that I've seen this year is absolutely amazing. So.
I guess that, Chad's example, if I could say, really, and what Eric had to say, particularly regarding what Peter said regarding once we get to the point where the staff is fully vaccinated and the fact that they wouldn't have to quarantine on exposure. I mean, you can see how big of a hurdle they'll clear in being able to keep kids in school and keep schools open, given the examples they just provided. So I think that really highlights, as much as what Peter said, puts a point to it, but when you hear the examples of what they were just saying, I think that says quite a lot about how impactful that's going to be when we get our staff fully vaccinated, and what that's going to do to keep our staff in the building and able to work on it when there's an exposure. So,
just to come back full circle to this whole conversation of reopening of schools, 45% of the schools in the country are not open to in-person learning. They are trying to get to where we are today. And even though this isn't a perfect system, by all means, we would like to have kids in school every single day. We'd like COVID to go away. What we're able to provide is still better than what 45% of the schools in this country are experiencing. Obviously, we want more, but this is what we can do within the guidelines that we have to work with and adhere to.
I think to your point, Peter, I think also, if I'm not mistaken, as much as Maine has done fairly well with this compared to other parts of the country, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Portland High School has any high school students in person, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not, there still is some of that in Maine, if I'm not incorrect on that point. As a whole, I think Maine has done better, and obviously, to the point that our administrators are making, I think our staff and teachers have done a Herculean job to step in and do all that they could do to maintain what we have which has been tough enough, obviously, on them. John, do you still have your hand up? It looks like you're.
Yeah, well, actually, Peter made my point, but I'll just reemphasize something that he said. It's kind of, I was going to say all or nothing, but that's not the right way to say it. It's either all or cohort. So you can't have halfway back from where we are. You're going to either have to be where we are or completely back. There isn't going to be any in between, other than maybe a couple kids changing their mind whether they're in school or not. But you're not going to get to a 75% ever, because that's just not going to work. And it's partly the size of the school. If you're a Class D school with 80 to 100 kids, there's plenty of room in your school to spread out. But our size school are bigger. It's just physically impossible.
Well, one thing I'll also point out, we haven't really talked about it from a transportation standpoint. But I mean, when we went with this plan back in the beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I mean, we based our plan and our need to provide transportation for students, busing, that we had gotten commitments from various families that they would be transporting their own children, which allowed us to have enough space on the school buses to make our typical bus runs and still maintain the spacing required on busing. So if we were to do that would be an issue we'd have to figure out how to get around. Aside from the issues of spacing in the classroom, we have this issue with spacing required on buses, even if we found space in the classroom. So that's just another one of those hurdles, if I'm not mistaken on that one, Peter.
You are not mistaken, Joel. You're 100% correct. And because of the parents helping with transportation, that is allowed us to do what we're doing. We still have on our larger buses, the maximum amount that we can put on a bus is 26. That's the maximum. Still, that hasn't changed.
I guess to go to a couple other points, since we're on the topic, I know you've covered this in some of your other meetings, but I know I've gotten correspondence where questions have been asked regarding, well, first of all, the requirement regarding lunch in the 6-foot spacing during lunch periods, obviously where they got masks off and the reading and such. Obviously that is a hurdle we still have to deal with per state requirements. But clearly, based upon the other things that we've been talking about, granted, I guess from what I understand, because I haven't even been in the building given all the COVID restrictions and all, but I guess we spread kids out a number of rooms to provide that 6-foot spacing for lunch periods. And so that is not the hurdle that's holding us back as far as bringing more students back to school. It's more of the hurdle of the 3-foot spacing in the classrooms, which hasn't changed, which given that current restriction, that's really the hurdle as far as bringing more students back. Is that a correct assessment?
That is one of the hurdles, Joel. Another hurdle would be in an elementary setting, let's say, you might have in classrooms, in addition to the teacher, you might have some ed techs who are providing additional support for students. Every time you add an ed tech into a classroom to provide supports for students, you have to reduce the number of students that are in that classroom, because the ed tech, the adult to student, has to be 6 feet. So that's another complication. So in addition to the 3-foot, the 6-foot is also an issue.
So regarding the lunch issue, and I'm presuming you didn't really touch on it when you were talking about, well, you mentioned the elementary, but this right now, the capacity required for lunch and the spacing required there is not a primary driver as far as bringing more students back. That's correct assessment, correct? Okay. And I guess I'd also ask, I mean, you indicated you're going to have conversations tomorrow about what opportunities might come up. Does improving weather with the oncoming of spring provide some opportunities for any additions with the use of outdoor classroom space, or which it might help in any of these against any of these restrictions that we have to work with?
Certainly would help in the area of music if they wanted to hold some music classes outside. It doesn't really help with the restrictions, because how do you schedule that not knowing what the weather is going to be and when somebody can be there and when somebody can't be there? And you can't refabricate your schedule every time. So you have like Chad was mentioning, just explaining earlier, you have a student who's going to 3 or 4 different classrooms, and some of those classrooms might be at capacity and some may not. And so whether the weather is nice or not, you don't have the space to put those students. We have a few outdoor classrooms that have been created, absolutely, but not enough to accommodate everything that we need to be doing. Plus,
yeah, I think
if you split that up, you need more people to teach those areas, and
right.
We have those teachers.
I guess to your point, as far as music classes and such, I did see some comment today from our chorus teacher, Chris Vigu, that they finally got to sing in chorus class. So I was, which she thought was pretty amazing to actually have to say that, but I assume she went outside today. So the weather has, to your point, I guess the weather has provided some opportunities that we haven't had. So another question that was brought up, and we kind of touched on it before a little bit. We can't go all night on it, but I know, the question has come up. So regarding COVID money and any opportunities, well, first of all, I know you've touched on it before. I'll just kind of summarize the restrictions that were on COVID money. Really, in many respects, in my assessment, were a little crazy in that it helped as far as like physical plant and maybe in the areas of ventilation, and it paid for heating oil for our junior high. But the way they structured a lot of that money, not that you had a lot of available teachers, but you couldn't use it to supplement to pay for things that were already in your budget. And also a lot of that money had to be spent by the end of the calendar year, which obviously doesn't work well with a school year. Just to kind of reiterate those points, because I don't know who's tuned in and whatever listening, but I know some of the questions I've heard that are there any indications where there's additional money coming that is going to be freed up in the short term that would, granted, it still comes down to a staff issue, space and staff, neither of which we have. Is that pretty much almost to the point, regardless of money at this point, as far as a short-term fix for any of the issues of getting students back?
That's a really good point, Joel. So you had this money that came to all school districts, and each school district had a portion of money that was for them, and the monies came to us with the understanding that they were to reopen schools. And again, reopen schools means something different to different people depending on what you're talking about for guidelines. But we reopened our schools, and then keep your schools open as much as you can, and then look at how do you sustain or keep going with in-person learning. So a lot of the things that we spent money on were geared towards that. As you said, Joel, you could not use the money for anything that would have been in the budget or to buy something out of the budget. So we had a whole list that we shared with you the last time that talked about air filtration and different cleaning machines and materials that we purchased, the PPE materials that we purchased, the substitute teachers that we purchased, that we've used money for, the almost $50,000 in heat to keep the old junior high open so that we could have 6th grade in that building. Technology that was purchased with that money. So we've utilized the majority of that money to do exactly what it was intended to do. Now, the monies that we have left over from the first round is going to be used to continue to look at summer school opportunities or intervention opportunities next year, where we can purchase some instructors to help at the elementary level to provide some support for our students for the entire year, assuming we are back in school normal. So, you know, we often talk about, well, how do we help the kids with some of the loss that they've had this year? One of the ways in which you can do that is to work with them and give them additional support for the year, as opposed to just offering a 2-week summer school opportunity. So we feel that the interventionist piece would be a more effective strategy in the long run. Having said that, the other piece that you can still use some of this money for is operations of schools to reduce risk. Now, that's a fancy way of saying provide more space. So if we were to receive, and we are scheduled to receive an additional allocation, we don't know exactly what that amount is going to be. But if we are to receive an additional allocation, one of the uses that we can use that for is to provide more space in our schools. Chad alluded to this earlier when he said that we don't have any additional space at the high school now that we have a high school, middle school combination. At the elementary school, now that we moved 6th grade into that building because we had some classroom space, now we are tight in that building as well. It would make sense for us to look at, could we expand on the elementary school and add a block of space? Years ago, when that structure was built, it was designed to have an additional wing placed on it. We have a perfect opportunity to add a block of space. And what I mean by a block is a downstairs and an upstairs, and that might give us 4 additional classrooms. And some of these funds could be used to do that, so that you would create more space and put yourself in a position where if you continue to have more students or you continue to grow at the elementary level, you would have the space there for that to happen. The other thing that would do is it would give you opportunities such as expanding the 4-year-old program, which would be not only of benefit to families with students of that age group, but it would also be a revenue to the schools, because you could have revenue for the 4-year-old program. So you would position yourself not only to help, but to have a revenue stream for the schools. So those are the things that we would be looking at with the next round, as opposed to doing other things, because we would be back in a position where we could get more kids in school.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I mean, I wanted to raise those points. I know some of them we brought up before, but I know there's people that expressed some interest, and I didn't know who might be tuning in online. So I wanted to put a little of that out there to get discussed and in some cases reiterated, so that people could hear some of the discussions. And I'm presuming, as you indicated, you were going to have some meetings tomorrow, and I'm sure ongoing, as they have been, I'm sure, assessing where things are at. That so you have been and will continue to look at opportunities to reach as many students as we can. Obviously, with the spacing guidelines that we have, that is limited from a space standpoint on a mass scale, but where you can deal with individual situations, as appears that Chad says we do anyway, on a regular basis, of students that want to come back, you're assessing those things on a regular basis. So I guess
we are, and the other thing that I think everybody needs to hear and keep in mind is that those conversations that teachers are having, it's very apparent that they're working at making the instructional program better for students as we continue in this mode. I mean, Chad's staff had some great conversations about some lesson development. If you look at where we've come from last March until now, where you've got our teachers who are teaching in person and remote, and you've got some kids who are right there every day experiencing instruction from our teachers, those are huge gains from where we were last year at this time. So that too is a component of all of this, is that we continue to look at improving on what we're currently doing.
I don't have any other questions or comments at this point. Does anybody else? I assume we'll continue to talk about it as circumstances change, and hopefully state requirements loosen at some point as things move along. So, okay, hearing nothing from anybody else. Thank you very much, Peter and the rest of the administrators, for your comments and obviously your continued work on that. So I guess we'll move on to new business. The proposed new phone system.
Will Backman is going to address that for us this evening.
Hello, everyone. It's quite an evening listening to one school board meeting out of one ear and another school board meeting out of the other, but try to make sure I showed up on cue. Just to give some background history, the phones at the Winslow Public Schools are over 12 years old, and the failure rate is pretty high, and we're definitely running out of spares. And the old phones that we have are no longer supported by Mitel on any of their new controllers. The controller was upgraded in 2013, which I always think is not that long ago, but then you do the math and you realize it is. But that's not even the expensive part of the phone system, because the brain or the controller is only about $4,000. But it's really the cost of the individual phones themselves. And a business phone costs anywhere from $180 to maybe $300, depending on the features. And we have about 190 phones. So when we were just looking at upgrading the phones on all the desks in Winslow, you were looking at a bill of $34,200 based on $180 a phone times 190 extensions. And so once you get to that kind of money, you really might as well put it out to bid and look at what all your options are, which is what we did. And so we put out the RFP and we did receive 5 bids. The evaluation committee was made up of 5 people, 2 from the tech team, including myself, 2 from office administrative staff, and 1 building administrator. And we received bids ranging from as high as $99,859 all the way down to just $44,600. And we evaluated the bids on a variety of factors, and price is the most significant, but it's not the overriding factor. And so the bid that the committee chose to recommend to you was the second lowest. It was $3,812 higher than the lowest bid. But there were other features like easy remote work, virtual faxing, and also an astounding warranty. Basically, it's a lifetime warranty while we maintain our phone lines through this company. So that has a real benefit. And that's just warranty and support and all that other kind of stuff. So we really felt that made up for the slightly higher $3,812 cost. And recommendations from other school districts that use this phone system was positive. Based on that amount, if it was a 4-year lease, then that would cost us approximately $13,000 a year to pay that off. And if it was a 5-year lease, it would be approximately $10,000 a year to pay it off. And what's nice is that our current budget we kind of had to put some big number in there. And so we kind of did a slightly high per seat costs, hoping that we'd come in under that. And we'd actually budgeted $18,000 for this phone system a year. So what's nice is now that the bids have come in and they're coming pretty low, that means that we're under that estimate, which is great. So basically, we're just seeking the school board's approval to accept the Winslow phone system bid from Cove Central, which is a company out of Brunswick, Maine, in the amount of $48,479, and also to pursue a multi-year lease.
What did you say the lifetime is on these?
The lifetime on a typical phone system?
Approximately.
Well, the current one we have now is over 12 years old. So we'd love to be able to get at least a decade out of a phone system. I mean, it starts to get, we're just using old used phones that we get from other schools that no longer use these systems anymore. At some point you can't get the equipment after a decade, but yeah.
I know I was on a phone call with Peter last week, and it was, the background noise was pretty substantial. So yeah, we definitely have issues with our phone system.
Yeah, another thing that this phone system is fairly modern, and it allows you to basically install an app on your phone and make it your extension. And having a flexible mobile workforce has definitely become a very important factor in phone systems today. So that was another nice feature.
Yeah, I think that's nice as our teachers move around the building and under different circumstances. So I think that sounds good. Earl, you have your hand up?
I do. Can you talk a little bit about the remote aspect? You mentioned that one of the advantages of this was that it had some remote options that other bids didn't have.
Well, I would say that the remote option is baked into this system. Other systems have that feature, but as a very pricey add-on.
Okay.
Okay. Jay, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so what you're referring to as the remote features, is that voice over internet protocol?
Correct, yep. Okay. You basically can install an app on your phone and it becomes your extension, or you can even log into the phone system over a web interface and make it kind of a virtual extension that way.
Good.
And you talked about a multi-year lease. Are you, has it been decided whether or not it's the 4 or 5 year lease? I didn't catch exactly what those numbers. I assume it's a little less money over 4 than 5. Is that correct?
Well,
as far as total cost?
I have not approached any leasing companies at this point, so I just sort of took the dollar value and divided it by 4, divided it by 5, and sort of rounded up a little bit to cover interest. But my calculations were, in a 4-year lease, that would be $13,000 a year, and if in a 5-year lease, that would be about $10,000 a year. Now, I'm guessing actually we could reduce that. So the budget year that we're in currently, not the one that we're talking about for next year, but the one that we're sitting in right now, we had already budgeted for a new phone system. We just had to put something in there. And so I did a sort of conservatively high so we wouldn't get caught off guard if they came in high of $18,000. So we have $18,000 in our current budget. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways we could swing this. Like we could put the full $18,000 in the current budget toward this and then figure out the remainder is and bring our yearly payments down to a pretty low amount for subsequent years. So this could have a great impact on, and in the budget that we're proposing for next year, because we didn't have firm numbers, that also had, a high estimate in it. So we can bring a lot down. So it depends on whether we want to save out of the current budget or if we've already allocated the money in the current budget, put the full amount towards it now, thereby reducing our future lease costs.
And this is where I want to go back and caution folks, because earlier you heard Amanda give the budget abstract where we had 71% of the year expended. We were at 70%. That is extremely tight. And the reason that is so tight is because of the extra substitutes that we have to purchase this year, because of the people that we have out. So I'm very cautious about saying that we can buy too much out of this year's budget, because I feel as though we're going to come in very close.
And I feel, for a system that typically lasts 10 years, a 5-year lease isn't risky, and that's what I've typically done with phone systems. And that puts us at $10,000 a year for the phone system.
Joel, I've got a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Earl.
Now, when you say that 5-year lease at $10K a year, and Peter, this is taken into account your more conservative mindset regarding the expenditure rate where we're at this year. Would 10 out of that 18,000 come from that for the first year's payoff or the first year's lease?
Well, we have money allocated in the current budget for
Correct.
the lease. And I would obviously put as much toward it as I was directed to do.
Understandable. When would the decision, presuming that there's the decision tonight to go ahead and execute on the lease, when would the determination be 4-year, 5-year? When would that be made?
Probably as part of our continued budget discussions, I guess, to figure out what we want to run.
I thought what you were going to ask, Earl, was, I thought where you were going with this was, when would a decision be made if you could use some of this year's money to buy some of that out? And that
was coming.
Yeah. So that gets, as Jay knows, that's really a game where you watch what happens towards the end of the year, because you're looking at, okay, we need to make our last payroll payment. How many things do we still have out there that are encumbered? How many things do we still have to pay? And you watch that very closely, and then you're watching your revenues to see if you're going to make the revenues that you anticipate that are coming in. And it's a real nerve-wracking game towards the end to be able to say, yeah, we're going to have enough to do something with this. And so that's where it becomes very, very tricky.
Yeah, but you've already, the bottom line is you've already got 18K, not necessarily obligated against this, but 18,000 is planned. It's a planning factor that's in the current year budget that we're currently in. Correct?
That is true, but I also didn't plan on having 6 people out on 12 weeks of leave. 12 weeks of leave. I didn't plan on that either.
Yeah.
So that 18K gets chewed up pretty quickly. So in a budget of that size, you're always looking at, where can you steal from one to pay for the other? Because you never know what type of emergencies are going to occur. And we've had things happen all year long that have been unexpected that we've needed to find some funds for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Jay had a question. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, it seems to me that we should decide whether or not we support the work of this committee. So question number 1 is whether or not this was the unanimous preference of the committee. And if that's the case, then I'm inclined to support it. I would prefer not to tie the administration's hand with respect to 4 or 5 years, with respect to how much money out of this year's budget or next year's budget. That all is Peter's responsibility as he manages all of the components of the budget. So I think we would be micromanaging to get into that. I think we should decide whether or not we support this system and then let the administration do its work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also indicate that, of course, if we don't spend the 18 this year and everything goes extremely well between now and the end of the year, and Peter doesn't need the money to offset something else, and it'll just go in the undesignated, which helps us in the out years anyway. So either way, it works. So I agree with what Jay had to say there. And I don't know if anybody else had any questions, or we're ready to go
Jay's,
along with.
Jay's
making
point
a
is
vote.
right on.
Yeah, I can work with that.
Yeah.
Was this the unanimous choice of the committee?
Everybody on the committee agreed with this choice, yes. I mean, we're always a little nervous. You know, a phone system upgrade is a big thing, but I've gone through a couple of them already. And
Okay. So if there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the new phone system as presented. Okay. Any other discussion or questions? All right, hearing none, I would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Friedel,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
and John Ferry.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Hey, Earl, your hand's still up. Now they're both up. Okay. All right, next up, I guess we have Mr. Burgoyne on spring athletics. It is spring now.
Yeah, just to inform you what's going on, the NPA and the government agencies they work with will allow us to play spring sports this year. Same guidelines as the fall: the 6 foot distancing, the requiring of mask.
Jim, do you have a PowerPoint that you wanted to show us?
Yep, second. Yeah, I can do that. Just give me a second. But I'll keep talking while I do that. So basically, we're going to be able to have a season this year. The biggest changes right now is that we're going to be able to have spectators, and that's a change from the fall in the winter. As of March 27th, they're going to allow us to have 75% capacity outside. And then on May 24th, they'll allow us to have 100% capacity. Now, the one thing they don't define is what your capacity is. And so what we're going to do with the 75% capacity for outside events is families can sit together. If you're not a part of the family member, we'll ask you to be 6 feet apart. And that will pretty much determine the 75% capacity. All sports will have some kind of adaptation. Like, for example, in baseball and softball, the dugouts will be limited. They'll ask the players to sit in lawn chairs outside the dugout all the way down the left field line and the right field line, and that will be different. In lacrosse, they will not do the face-off anymore. They'll flip a coin like they did in basketball. So there'll be some changes as we go this spring. But for the most part, the good news is the kids are going to get to compete, and their parents and family members will get to. Yeah, John.
Does that include away teams, spectators?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to 5 schools Friday, and none of them are going to limit capacity. And what they mean by that, they're not going to say that visiting fans can't come. I think what we need to do is be smart with this. Here's my presentation right here. What we need to do is be smart with this, and make sure that we don't have overcrowding. The only sport I'm really worried about right now is track, and because track can bring a lot of people. And even that, I think we can do safely. So I think we can do that. Just look at this first slide again. All coaches will be required to follow the MPA guidelines and the CDC guidelines. Mask will be worn. Okay, and these are the offerings we have this spring. Baseball, softball, and track for the junior high. Baseball, softball, lacrosse boys and girls, tennis boys and girls, and track and field. Yeah, John?
Do we have numbers in all those sports?
We just had the signups up. Today, baseball and softball started, pitches and catches. Everything else starts Monday. I will tell you that numbers are lower than they've ever been. And I think that's COVID related because the schools in the KVAC have all reported that they have smaller participation levels at this time.
So we're having tennis.
We've always had tennis, but I don't know if we'll have a boys tennis team. As of right now, we don't have anybody signed up, so that may go. But we're trying to really encourage boys to sign up. Again, this spring, all coaches are going to be required to take the NFHS COVID course. We'll ask their parents to sign the assumption of risk by either a parent or a guardian. Change that, Mayor? Okay. But again, the masks are going to be, everybody's going to wear a mask. Spectators are going to wear a mask. They're going to be responsible for the 6 foot of distancing. And again, I already talked about the individual sports will adapt to the changes, and there will be some changes as far as that goes. And again, this is the 75% permitted on March 26th. And on May 24th, they're going to 100% occupancy. And again, we'll put signs up around, with basically our CDC requirements, mask. We'll ask them to socially distance, and we'll really keep an eye on the crowds just so we stay safe. Because as you know, right now, even though it feels like we're coming out of the woods here with COVID-19, the state still has cases still around 200 people every day. So we still have to be careful. We're certainly not out of the woods.
With 100%, the way I read this, the track, for instance, is the biggest spectator sport, as far as I would guess, of the spring. And thereafter, the 24th of May, the state championship, and even the KVACs.
Yep, I'm on the Mpa Track Committee, and we're certainly going to sponsor a state championship, but that is something we need to really work on, because 2 years ago at Brewer, where Winslow competed in the state championship, there was over 3,200 fans. And so I think as a committee with the Mpa, we need to really think this over, how we can be safe. Again, masks will be enforced. Obviously, at 100% capacity, you're still going to ask for social distancing. But if you have 3,200 people at an event, you have to really, you'll probably have to have extra marshals work in the event to make sure that the distancing is informed. I'm going to put team areas in track, so the teams stay in a certain area. We'll kind of find a 50-yard circle for each team. The meets will only consist of 2 other teams besides Winslow. So, and as far as junior high track goes, junior high may just be virtual meets. They haven't decided as far as the league yet if they're going to be virtual, if they're going to be live. But we know that high school track will be live. Is there any questions or anything? And again, I talked to our neighbors. None of them are going to limit any capacity issues at this point. Obviously, that could change if things change. But at this point, we'll go forward with crowds and see how that works.
You had indicated rules changes and things like that. I mean, you mentioned the face-offs in lacrosse. Any other significant rules changes, COVID related?
Yeah, baseball umpires will no longer be behind the plate. They'll be standing behind the mound, and they'll be calling balls and strikes from behind the mound. In softball, the umpire will stand 6 feet behind the catcher, so they'll be really far back. But they felt with the infield being so small, they couldn't put the umpire behind the mound in that sport. So that's kind of how some changes that gone. As far as track goes, we're kind of debating if we're going to disinfect the mats every time somebody jumps, or if we're going to have the students bring their own tarps. Kind of exploring how we're going to do that so we can keep the areas disinfected. But it will be interesting. It will look different, but I think the good news is the kids will get to compete, and they'll get to compete for state championships. That's great.
Yeah, well, that's a huge improvement as to where we were this time last year when our spring sports had nothing.
Yeah.
So as much as my knowledge of lacrosse and such being a possession game, not having face-offs is quite a change, but I'm sure it's better than not having any sport at all.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any other questions for Jim? Okay, so we need to vote on this. We voted on every season to go along with the guidelines. So I guess if we're entertaining this, I guess we'd be looking for a motion to approve the spring sports following guidelines presented. Is that what you're doing, John, or do you have a question?
I do have a question before we go any further. We're going to vote on, shouldn't we say that if there are any changes, because the governor and some of the rules have changed recently and are liable to change again, so we should have flexibility in our motion, is all I want to say.
I think if the motion was such that we follow the applicable guidelines that as they're made, I think we would be fine.
Yeah. So moved.
Okay,
Second.
So we have a motion. We have a second from Earl, motion from John. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, I would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. And I didn't say thank you to Will before in your presentation and work on the school systems. Thank you, Will. All right.
Joel, before you do the next agenda item, I would request permission from you to add Christopher Larson as a Winslow High School assistant girls softball coach for nominations.
That'd be a volunteer coach.
Oh, he's a volunteer coach?
Yeah, it's a volunteer assistant coach. And he's been a coach in the past.
High school varsity softball?
Yes. Yes, volunteer.
Okay. Okay, if there's no objections, we will add that name to the list of appointments. So that's where we're at, is voting on appointments. We have quite a number of them.
Motion to take them all as a group.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second from John. Who made the original motion?
Earl.
Earl, okay. Second from John. Just want to make sure that there's no objections before we proceed, because I hate to think this sort of vote ought to be unanimous. So not hearing objections, so I guess we'll move forward with the vote on taking the role of appointments as a lot. I would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry. John.
Are you a yes, John? John, we didn't hear you. You're at 2 thumbs up. Okay, we'll go with that. I think your video is breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now that we've decided to take them as a lot, is there a motion to approve the lot of appointments?
So moved.
We have a motion from John. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Earl's the second man today, or first. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the lot of appointments? I would be a yes.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Jay McIntyre,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll get to that time, John. All right, so we have resignations. Peter's already accepted those. Brenda, who knows? Maybe Brenda will be back in some other capacity. You never know with Brenda, so that's nice. And too bad Katie McCabe didn't get a lacrosse season last year to lead the girls, but hopefully we're successful in having a girls lacrosse coach for this coming season. I know that was an opening that we were working on. So other business, I guess I'll remind anybody that's listening online, there's the public comment section got moved to the end of the agenda, and we're getting close to that right now. So if you have some public comments for anybody, now's the time to call in, and you have an opportunity for a couple of minutes to indicate your comments. So while we're waiting to see if anybody calls, do we have any other business? Okay. Not hearing anyone right now. A reminder of our next regular meeting is April 26th at 6 p.m. And depending on what happens with budget or other circumstances that might arise, there might be a special meeting in between there somewhere, but we'll see how that goes.
And tomorrow.
And tomorrow we have our budget workshop with the council at 6 p.m. And you should be all getting links for that. I believe we're doing that virtually, I think. And I think that is it. So before we move to adjournment, do we have any phone calls for public comment?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. So speak now, forever hold your peace. I guess we're holding our peace. All right. So that being said, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
Nobody's
moved.
going to do it. So move. That was, who was
Jay.
that? That was Jay. Okay. Do we have a second? Nathan, you can do it. I know you can.
Erica,
So-
the town manager, added a comment in the chat.
That was something about fronting the budget meeting. I didn't catch that.
Oh, yeah.
Just
They're doing they're talking about the hydro dams on the Kennebec. They're doing it at 6 o'clock so that our meeting might start at 6:15 or 6:30. Following that, so I guess we'll tune in, and when they're ready to go, we'll go. So, and I'm assuming that special meeting will be available streaming anyway. So if you want to follow along with that, I'm sure you can. Should be an interesting topic.
Water over the dam.
Yeah, well, we've done it once, and apparently we're going to be talking about it again. So anyway, we've got a motion and a second for adjournment. If there's not anything else, I will vote yes for adjournment.
Who had the motion? I'm sorry, I missed that.
John had the motion.
Okay.
No, Jay had the motion, correct, Jay?
Yes.
And Nathan had the second.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm a yes on adjournment.
Earl Watts,
Yes.
Jeff Riddell,
Yes.
Nathan Tyler,
Yes.
John Ferry,
Okay.
and Jay McIntyre.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.